Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Friends, before going into the details of the war, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell. Please support by subscribing and turning on the notification bell. We are a strong community. Russo-Ukrainian War. Day 235. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized reported that Russian troops attempt to reach the administrative border of Donetsk Oblast and are holding captured territories of Kharkiv, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, and Kherson Oblasts. Russian forces continued ground attacks in Donetsk Oblast and continued counterattacks west of Kreminna. Ukrainian troops launched a general counteroffensive in northern Kherson Oblast. Ukrainian forces likely struck Russian military assets situated along Russian ground lines of communication, GLOCs, in Zaporizhia Oblast and southern Donetsk Oblast. Russia may have signed a new contract with Iran for the supply of Arash-2 drones. Kyiv is partially covered by an anti-drone dome protecting especially important objects. An energy infrastructure facility seriously damaged in Kyiv. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized Russians reported. The total losses of the Russian army are approaching 65,000. The General Staff's operational update regarding the Russian invasion as of 6 a.m., October 16, 2022 is in the drop-down menu below Home, Ukraine, Daily Review, Russo-Ukrainian War. Day 235. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized reported Russo-Ukrainian War. Day 235. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized reported the 16th of October 2022 1531. Daily Review article by Zarina Zabriskie. The Russian troops attempt to reach the administrative border of Donetsk Oblast and are holding captured territories of Kharkiv, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, and Kherson Oblasts. Russian forces continued ground attacks in Donetsk Oblast and continued counterattacks west of Kreminna. Ukrainian troops launched a general counteroffensive in northern Kherson Oblast. Ukrainian forces likely struck Russian military assets situated along Russian ground lines of communication, GLOCs, in Zaporizhia Oblast and southern Donetsk Oblast. Russia may have signed a new contract with Iran for the supply of Arash-2 drones. Kyiv is partially covered by an anti-drone dome protecting especially important objects. An energy infrastructure facility seriously damaged in Kyiv. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized Russians reported. The total losses of the Russian army are approaching 65,000. Daily Overview. Summary Report. October 16. The General Staff's operational update regarding the Russian invasion as of 6 a.m., October 16, 2022 is in the drop-down menu below. Situation in Ukraine. October 15, 2022. Source. ISW. Situation in Ukraine. October 15, 2022. Source. ISW. Show the content. Military updates. Shelling by Russian troops. Icelandic data analyst. Shelling by Russian troops. Icelandic data analyst. The next few weeks of the war in Ukraine will be critical, according to CNN experts. Colder weather will likely lead to a slowdown in ground combat, so the next weeks of war will be critical. The Russian troops will try to avoid a collapse on their front line before the onset of winter. Regional updates. Kyiv is partially covered by an anti-drone dome protecting especially important objects, said the advisor to the mayor of Kyiv Yuri Zazulya. It will take about 2 years to build a full-fledged anti-drone dome. The drone dome already fragmentarily exists in Kyiv. As a result of the morning missile attack on the Kyiv region, an energy infrastructure facility was seriously damaged. Rolling blackouts are possible, reports Ukrenergo. In occupied Crimea, explosions reported. Air defense is working in Sevastopol, Novofedorovka, Evpatoria and Sake. In Belarus, the first echelons of the Russian military arrived, said the Ministry of Defense of Belarus in the Russian Federation. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially confirmed an execution at the training ground. 11 dead and 15 injured. 2 citizens of one of the CIS countries fired at the personnel of the unit and were killed. According to Russian media, the shooting took place at a training ground in the village of Soloti. In Belgorod, the oil depot was on fire. In Russia, the first funerals of recently mobilized Russians reported. According to the BBC, 14 more people died before reaching the front: suicides, heart attacks, fights, and other mysterious ailments. 4 reasons Putin won't start a nuclear war over Ukraine. In the last few weeks, there has been widespread speculation that Russian President Vladimir Putin might use a nuclear weapon in his war against Ukraine. This has generated speculation on how the West might react, including the use of nuclear weapons in response. As Cheryl Rofer notes, much of this commentary has been irresponsible, trading on the lurid, apocalyptic possibilities of nuclear weapons to throw out alarmist scenarios. Her trenchant term for this is nuke porn. She is almost certainly right. Putin's nuclear war? Not likely to happen. Putin is highly unlikely to use nuclear weapons. He even had to say he is not bluffing, because he has been, with nukes, since the start of the war. And given that Putin's supporters in the West have been the ones talking up this contingency, one strongly suspects bad faith. That is, Putin's Western flunkies are hyping nuclear war to scare the West into ceasing aid to Ukraine, in order to help Russia win the war, which is their real goal. There are at least 4 major reasons why Russian nuclear escalation is a huge gamble, with such a low upside probability that use is unlikely. What target would Putin strike? This is the biggest problem. There is no obvious target. Even a small battlefield or tactical nuclear weapon, less than 5 kilotons in yield, would have massive destructive effects. There would also be enormous geopolitical blowback, discussed below. What huge, valuable, hardened target is commensurate with such force? The Ukrainian army is not concentrated enough in one location to merit so much striking power. The Russian-Ukrainian front is hundreds of miles long, with fighters stretched out all across southeastern Ukraine. Russia also has poor intelligence for finding possible Ukrainian concentrations. Any meaningful Ukrainian military target can be sufficiently struck with Russian conventional weapons. Nor is there any obvious infrastructural target. Ukrainian transportation nodes, road and rail exchanges, bridges, hardly merit such massive force. This leaves striking a city, with the sole intent of killing civilians in huge numbers. This is conceivable. A city is large enough to be commensurate with the power of a nuclear weapon. But the global backlash would be massive. NATO would likely enter the war directly after what would seem to many like nuclear genocide. And such a counter-value strike would still not help Russia on the battlefield to actually win the war. Would a nuclear strike outweigh the massive global backlash? No one knows how the world would respond to such a strike. But Russia would almost certainly lose the tepid support it now has in China, India, and the global south. A nuclear strike, raising the terrifying prospect of normalizing nuclear weapons use in future wars, would scare even the most hardened anti-Western regimes. The democratic world's response would be severe. Russia would face extreme economic sanctions, including complete expulsion from the SWIFT system, confiscation of overseas assets, expulsion of its nationals, and so on. NATO would likely intervene in the air and at sea, enforcing the no-fly zone which was so controversial this spring, and sinking Russia's Black Sea Fleet. And if the Russian nuke were used against a city, with massive civilian casualties, NATO might enter the war on the ground. The Russian army in Ukraine could be affected. For a battlefield nuclear weapon to meaningfully alter the course of the war, it would have to be used close to the fighting. That almost certainly means exposure of some forward Russian units to the effects of the blast. Russian logistics has not performed well providing Russian units with their basic needs. It is hard to imagine that logistical train also provides protective gear for operations on an irradiated battlefield. So Russia's new conscript army, already suffering from morale and desertion problems, would be exposed to radiation, and possibly the strike itself if they were close enough. This would almost certainly worsen the army's problem of low commitment to the fighting. Ukraine probably would not give up. The battlefield value of a nuke drop is low. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.